Hi, so this is kind of a freebie. So I wanted to give you guys a video. You don't have to watch it, but for those of you that are opening up Maya and you're like, what is this? Or you're opening it up and you're like, I'm ready to go, I want to play. I just want to give you a quick overview. We're going to cover this in more depth in class, but I wanted to at least give you kind of a let's get up and running. So when you open up your Maya program, it may or may not look like this. So I'm actually gonna the first thing is the kind of major layout, and what controls these major layouts is this workspace preset. So you're probably, I think it defaults into Maya Classic. I'm going to go in and say reset my current workspace to the Maya Classic, right? So I'm in Maya Classic, I say reset current workspace. So this is probably bringing me to what you all are seeing when you open up Maya for the first time. All right, so first things first is we always want to save our project and create a default workspace. So what the default workspace does and what we're about to do is both save the file and create a file where all of our preferences are going to be saved. It's pretty important right now. It can get a little bit buggy if you don't have your preferences saved in the same place as your file. But it will get very buggy once you start bringing in like images that you're using or movies or saving animations. You want to make sure that the preferences file, which is telling Maya where all of those things are, is saved with your project, and each project has its own folder and it has its own default workspace. Super important. Cannot underscore this enough, right? All right, so every time we open a new project, I want you to go into File, Save Scene As, and I think by default, it's gonna go into at least in a Mac, it's gonna go into your Documents folder. I'm gonna go back up so you can navigate using these folders, either like going back up into a directory, so bringing yourself back up. I actually want to, I think, save it in my Documents folder. I've got a folder here called Maya, and then my Projects folder. And then these are a bunch of folders from previous classes. I'm going to actually make a new folder for spring and then probably delete all of those. So fall, whatever semester we're in. So I'm going to call this Fall 2020. And I would recommend for you to make a folder, ART102, and then so I'm going to say we're all in the same place. So this is ART102, and then your last name. So my last name, Holderton. Okay. All right. So I have now created a new folder where I'm going to save all of my projects. I'm going to double click into that folder and then say new folder, and this is Holberton intro, and then I'm going to use the date 2020, the month 08, and then the day 21. This little naming convention allows me to keep, let's say I have like multiple revisions of a project, it allows me to kind of iterate on those revisions based on the date. And then when I bring up all of my list of files, I can sort them by the date, and I know which one is the most current. All right, and now that I've got my folder, so this is my projects folder, so this is where I'm going to actually save all of my projects and my default workspace for this project for today, the intro. I'm going to say set project. So this is going to create a default workspace. So I'm going to go back in to that folder that I just made. So that's in Documents. It's in Maya, it's in Projects, and then I made that new folder for Fall 2020, and then that folder. So you should all have a folder called ART102 with your last name, and then I'm going to click into my intro, and so now I am inside of that folder where I want to save the project and my default workspace, and I'm going to say set. So this is going to set my default workspace, which is my preferences, and it says this location doesn't have a project definition file, a workspace.mel. So this workspace.mel file is the place where all of our preferences will be set. So I'm going to say set default workspace. All right, so now that I've set my default workspace, I can see that little .mel file shows up inside of the folder, which is exactly what I want. So now I can say I'm going to save my file. So I'm going to save as, same thing. I'm going to say Holberton intro, and then name it the same thing as my project folder with the date. So I'm going to say 2020-08-21. And my binary default is fine. All of these defaults are great. And then it's going to say student version. Yes, great, continue. All right, so now I see this down here in my script tab. It says result users Holberton intro is saved. Awesome. Okay, so now we're ready to play around a little bit. So every time you open up your file, you want to go File, Save As, create your default workspace, ensure that you're making a new folder for a new project, set your default workspace to that folder, and then save your project into that folder. All right, so we're not going to cover it. I just want to cover the kind of very basics of what we'll be using. So I already kind of talked about the Maya Classic viewport. Maya allows you to do a lot of things, and kind of, anything that has these little double lines here, I can actually rip out and kind of put in another place. Sometimes that's really useful to do, especially when Maya's not going to be all funky about that kind of perspective. This black space around here, that's actually not supposed to happen. That's one of those super fun little Maya bugs. Okay, good to know. All right, so I'm gonna pull out. No, it doesn't want to let me. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I can always put it back. So grabbing those little two dotted lines, and then you can hover over a seam in your window, and it will highlight blue, so it'll show you where it will get inserted back into. If you kind of let's say you pull one of these things out and you delete it accidentally, so you're trying to figure out your layout, and you're that thing's in my way, and you delete it, and you're oh no, I've deleted my tools. You can always go back up here to this workspace, Maya Classic, and my Maya Classic, and say reset current workspace, and it's going to bring your tools back. All right, the other thing, let's get to jumping in and kind of creating. So I also have my 3-button mouse, so make sure you've got your 3-button mouse. This is going to be my left click, my right click, and then this zoom wheel is going to allow me to zoom in and out of the scene. It's also going to be a center mouse button. You can actually click it. Okay, so the first thing that I'd want to do is make sure that I'm in my modeling drop-down menu. We're going to be primarily using our modeling to create objects and manipulate objects in the scene. And then we're going to be using our rendering tab when we go into rendering or adding lights, or I think textures. We also use it for textures. Is that true? Yes, it's true. We are going to use the FX tab just very, very lightly in this class when we get into rigid body physics, but that's not for a little bit. But when I change between these tool sets, you can see the menu bar changes. So I think up to Windows. Yeah, up to Windows is always going to stay the same, but then after Windows, there's different suites of menu sets that are specific to each one of these types of tasks. So we're going to start in modeling and make sure you're in modeling, and then we're going to use these poly shapes, these poly modeling shapes. So I have something turned on that I like called interactive creation, and that is where create Polygon Primitives. I have interactive creation turned on. I'm going to turn it off for now, just so that. Hi, I just want to jump back in here in case you were curious about what interactive creation was. And there's another thing that I have turned on that I also wanted to show you. So forgive all these, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. So interactive creation, without it turned on, is going to create an object in the center of your grid, the origin, 0, 0, 0. And the scale is going to be 1 unit by 1 unit by 1 unit, whatever the object's kind of base measurement is. With interactive creation turned on, so that's the thing I just turned off, I'm going to turn it back on. So under creation, Polygon Primitives, I'm going to turn on interactive creation and make a cube. That's going to allow you to drag out the footprint of the cube and then drag out the height, right? So it's great for creating shapes that are kind of non-uniform shapes. Same goes true for any of these objects, right? So, or sphere, drag out the sphere. So that's interactive creation. The other thing that I remember that I have turned on that doesn't come turned on by default, which I don't know why it's not, is the zoom to the cursor. So I think, without it turned on, you're just always zooming to like center. With it turned on, when I zoom in and out using that middle mouse button here into my scene, it's going to zoom to the location wherever my cursor is. So if I wanted to zoom to my cylinder, I put my mouse over my cylinder and I zoom in, and I can zoom out again. If I want to zoom into that cube I just made, I can zoom into the cube with my mouse hovering over it. I find that to be incredibly useful, and it's in a very funny and kind of hard to find place. So if you go into your view and then camera tools, this is actually, you click on the box next to your dolly tool. So click on that little white box. It's going to bring up the options. You want to make sure this center or towards center, I think, is the default that's checked on. You want that unchecked. So when that's unchecked, it will zoom by default to your mouse cursor. Okay, so that's it. That's all I wanted to show you. So I think, yeah, when I have towards center on, no matter where my mouse is, it's just always going to zoom in towards the center. It won't change, which might be useful in some applications, but I always find that I want to be able to control like where I'm zooming. So that's what I have turned on. And again, that's under the view, under the camera tools. And then in order to get into that dolly tool settings, I have to click on the little white box next to dolly tool. And then I can check off, turn off towards center. Okay, I'll get back to our regularly scheduled program now. But I do kind of mirrors the default. So if I wanted to create any one of these shapes, I could click on a shape, and it's just going to automatically add that shape to the center of my scene at a scale of 1, 1, 1. I've made a cute little cube. I can move that cube with W. I can rotate it with E, so I'm just pressing W, E, and R on my keyboard. I can also use these hotkeys, so the rotate here, the translate, and then the scale. All right, so let's put my translate tool on, and I can grab each one of these axes and move it kind of along, move the cube along each axis. So you'll see, I'm going to undo, undo, undo. So when I grab this Y, you can see grab that Z handle. You can see that the translate Z numbers here change. When I grab my X handle, you can see the translate along the X numbers change. And when I grab my Y handle, you can see the translate Y numbers over here change. You can translate one axis at a time, or you can kind of grab these little plane handles, which will move you along plane. So if I want to move along my Y and my Z, I can grab this and it just moves the shape along a single plane, but you can see that it's not moving along the X-axis. It's just a single slice in space. I can do that around the X and the Z axes as well, and you can see, I'm pointing like you can see my finger. You can see here when I grab these kind of two plane translate feet handles, only two of these numbers are going to change as well, right? So if I wanted to move around the Y and the X axis, I could do that here. I can also hard type these numbers back in. So if I wanted to move the cube back to 0, 0, 0, I can just type that into each one of these, my channel box editor form fields, I guess. All right, so that is translate. I can also free form, so like grabbing the center, this little yellow box, and you can see all three numbers change. That can be a little bit tricky when you're in your perspective view. So let me add a couple other shapes for funsies. I'm going to add a cube. No, I don't want to add another cube. I want to add a sphere, and I can move that around in space, and then I'll add a cylinder. And maybe a cone. Super fun.